Here's my story. I'm currently almost 18, and this happened when I was a 3 or 4-year-old boy. I know that because it's one of the first memories I can recall myself having, probably because it was a pretty major event in my otherwise simple life. I was living in Moscow with my parents and my older sister. We were a pretty poor family and lived a very conservative lifestyle. My parents would go to work every day, and while my sister was at school, my grandparents would come over and cook for me and look after me, which is very normal for a Russian family. Back to the point. It was the summer of 2001 or 2002, and my family went on our bi-weekly supermarket trip. It was a big deal as I wasn't allowed to get out much due to the fact that we were living in a pretty rough district of Moscow. My dad was driving that day, and everything was normal when we got to the supermarket. While my mom and sister were getting all the food and other things, I would normally be with them. That day, I stopped to try and read a label or something, and when I looked back up, I realized that my mother wasn't there. She assumed that I was still following them, while I assumed that they were taking a while picking groceries. My dad wasn't nearby, as I'll explain later. It was one of those moments which we all experience, where we lose our parents in the supermarket and start freaking out. As a toddler, I obviously started tearing up, and I didn't really know what to do. Then, a man saw me, ran up to me, and asked what was wrong. I told him that I lost my family, and he quickly asked if my mother was the blonde lady. I told him that she was, and he stretched out his hand and told me that he knew where they went. I immediately got very happy and held his hand as we walked out of the supermarket into the car park. Despite what my parents told me about following strangers, I assumed that my mom had already bought everything and headed off back to the car. The man walked me up to his car, opened the door, and told me to climb in. Looking back at it, it was probably the stupidest thing I had ever did in my life, because I proceeded to get into the car as he shut the door. This is where my dad came into the story. When we were in the supermarket, he realized that he left the multimedia controller in the car. For those of you that this makes little sense to, this is what that means. As was common in Russia, not sure about other countries, cars at that time had the big multimedia boxes installed, and you could attach different controllers to them, which were upgradable and gave you different functions or looked better, etc. These removable controllers were quite expensive, and thus it was extremely common for cars to be broken into in order to have them stolen. Thus, most people developed a habit of removing it and taking it with them, or at least putting it in the glove box. My dad quickly went to grab it from the car, fearing that it could be thieved. While he was in the car, he saw me walking with a stranger and immediately realized what was going on. He got out and sprinted towards us, and he got there just as the strange man closed the door with me in the car. I'm not going to pretend that I know what happened next or make up a Hollywood-style fist fight between my dad and the man. But all I know is that a few seconds later, my dad carried me away from the car, and I couldn't see the man anywhere in sight. It was my dad's pounding heart that made me realize what had just happened, and I started crying hysterically and apologized to my dad and mom, who ran outside to look for me. I think that was the last straw for my parents, as a month or so after that, we sold our flat and lived with my grandparents, while my parents were finishing buying a new flat on the opposite side of the city, in a much safer district. Parents, regardless of how smart you may think your kids are, don't leave them unattended in public places. There are some horrible people around here, and not only in Moscow. And to the strange man from all those years ago, let's never, ever meet again. A few days ago, I decided to go to Walmart to pick up a few things. That day, I was wearing a bright dress with sunflowers printed on it. I wore my hair down, which is also a brighter blonde color. As I was shopping, I went down the international aisle to grab mirin. As I walked down, I felt eyes on me. I stood in front of the shelves stocked with different sauces and condiments, looking for mirin, when a guy came so close to me that I had to look at him. The moment we locked eyes, he smiled and said,
"Hi, how are you?"
I instantly felt uneasy, so I said nothing, smiled at him, and walked away. There's no particular reason this man made me feel uneasy. He looked fine. He looked like he was in his early mid-30s, maybe a few inches taller than me, around 5'8", and had brown hair. His dirty orange cutoff shirt and brown boots made me think that he was in construction, but who knows? All I know is that he was weird in a way that I can't put my finger on. After I walked away, I went to the complete opposite end of the store and kept looking around me. He was nowhere to be found for the next 20 minutes or so that I shopped, so I thought that I was just overreacting. I started heading towards the checkout area, and once I got to the lines, I saw him standing right next to the refrigerators next to the checkout, staring at me. He had one item in his hand, so after we made eye contact, he walked towards the self-checkout area. I did a 180 and headed for the longest line I could find, thinking that I could wait him out. It took about 20 minutes to get through checkout, and I dragged my feet out of the store, making sure the guy wasn't waiting for me in the store. With him nowhere to be seen, I picked up the pace once I got outside. I started to think that I was being irrational. He wasn't unattractive. He gave off no signs of actually being dangerous. I must be crazy, right? Walking towards my car, I saw a brown worker's truck waiting close to the exit start to drive around the parking lot once I stepped out of the store. I didn't think much of this truck at the time because I had thought the guy had left, and at that point, I just wanted to get into my car because it was raining. I finished packing my truck when the same truck started to pull through the spot diagonal to mine, slowly inching into the spot right next to my car so that my driver's side was right next to the truck's driver's side. I heard the guy's voice say,
"Excuse me."
as I opened my car door. I quickly slid in, hoping I could just get away with him thinking that I didn't hear him. I locked the door, turned the car on, and quickly turned it into reverse. I started pulling out, but before I could get far, the brown truck pulled forward and moved diagonally right behind my car so that I couldn't back up without hitting his car entirely. I looked in front of me and realized with a car in front of me, there was no way I was going to just drive right out of there with no issues. I turned my head and saw the guy sitting in his truck with his window rolled down. I decided to roll down my window and asked, "What's up?" in a hostile tone. He began,
"I just saw you in the store, and you were absolutely so beautiful. I just had to tell you."
"Oh, thank you," I said, praying he didn't get out of his vehicle.
"I couldn't let myself walk away without asking for your number so that I can take you out."
He told me. I picked up my hand with a wedding ring and told him, "I'm married," as he began to respond. I rolled up my window and stared at my steering wheel, waiting for him to move his truck. I couldn't stand to look in his direction because I felt his eyes on me. So after what seemed like the longest minute, I heard him finally move his truck. I peeled out of there in a heartbeat. The guy might have had great intentions. He might have been genuine, but I got a dark and heavy vibe that didn't sit right with me. So guy at Walmart who blocked me into my spot to ask me out, let's not meet again. My best friend and I went to Walmart one day to get groceries for her mom. We went in and started grabbing produce on the list when I noticed a strange man standing right by the front door and staring. It gave me the creeps, but overall, I thought it was just a weird man. I live in SoCal and they're everywhere. About 6'3", Hispanic, and wearing a Ducks sweatshirt. As I was grabbing some potatoes, he comes uncomfortably close to me and looks at the potatoes too. I walk away and go to my friend who is 20 feet away from me. I still don't mention this man to my friend because I thought he just had no clue of keeping a good social distance between people. We finally made our way to the soup aisle, and here he comes, walking down the aisle right in between me and my best friend to look at chicken broth. I tell my friend we need to go grab other things, so we leave the aisle and I give her the rundown on how I believe this man is following me. She agrees that she's seen him and feels weird energy around him. We head over to the tampon section because my friend needed some. I'm standing at our cart and she's squatting down on the ground when this man comes up and squats right next to her, looking at pads and tampons. This made us feel extremely awkward, so we left immediately and went to the back of the store to see if he was actually stalking us. We noticed that in his basket, he had nothing but a bottle of Sprite. Yet, he's been down so many food and item aisles with us that he should have grabbed something if he was just a normal shopper. We waited about 5 minutes in the back of Walmart, where we start to walk to the front, and we see him walking the opposite way as us, peering down each and every aisle. Once he sees us, he stops and just pretends to look at something on a side aisle while keeping eye contact on us. My friend and I went to the makeup section. If you know a ghetto Walmart, you know it's blocked with only one way in and one way out, with a lot of cameras. We go in here and look out through one of the aisles to see him still searching for us. We start to kind of freak out because we both aren't the strongest girls and know that he can probably take us if it came down to that. We decide to hurry up and get in line to check out. I was talking to my best friend, facing away from the cashier, when he gets in line right behind us. She did the most ballsy thing I've ever seen her do and told him off. She was saying how he was following us and that he went down every aisle we did, but only has a Sprite in his basket. Soon after, he scarcely walks away, which still made us feel uneasy. We didn't know if he would be waiting outside for us or have him and some friends ready to get us. We went to a worker and told them to keep their eye out for this guy. After we check out, we quickly made our way to the car with my friend's taser ready to zap. We made it back safe to the car and didn't see him since our interaction. Hopefully, I never meet this guy again.